Alright, in this video, we're going to talk about the startup procedure for this machine. We're also going to talk about the menu buttons and how to shut it down. So this is the Haas TM-1p, and the startup procedure is going to be similar for any of the TM series machines. So first thing you want to do is make sure you got the power on the back of the machine turned on. You also want to make sure you have 100 psi of compressed air supplied to the machine, and that has to be a constant flow. So after you got that taken care of, you can go ahead and power the machine on, and that's this big green button here. When you press that button, the machine's going to go through its startup procedures. It's going to boot up similar to a computer. It takes a few seconds. There you can see the software. You may have different software, and when you get up to the startup screen, it might look a little different. Maybe different colors, different setup. So here we are. We got the blue on white setup here, and it's this version of software. So when you get to this screen, before you can do anything with the machine, the first thing you want to do is start it up and clear out the alarms to make sure all the safety interlocks work. So to do that, do just what it says in this flashing box here. So I'm going to press the E-stop. I'm going to release the emergency stop. I'm going to open the door, close the door. Now I can press reset to clear out the alarm for the emergency stop. Again, to clear out the alarm for the door. And you could hear it kind of click on. So we're ready to go. Now it's telling you to power up and zero all the axes. So to do that, right next to the reset button is the power up restart. Just hit that one time. So what this is doing is it's taking all the axes to the home position, and it's going to zero out the machine, so all your coordinates are good to go and you're ready to run stuff. So if you look here at the machine position, these will all end up being 0, so that's your MRZ 000. The machine will also change by default to the tool number 1. When it beeps, it's done. So you can see we're at 000, that's MRZ, and we're at tool 1, so we're good to go. At this point, you can start running programs, setting up work offsets, all that good stuff. But before you do that, before you turn the machine, the spindle on, make any movements, the first thing you want to do is run the Spindle warm-up program. So to do that, go to the very bottom here to list program, hit enter to enter the memory mode, or the memory tab. Then you want to scroll up to Spindle warm-up for the TM-1p only. That's a custom program written specifically for this machine, because this spindle maxes out at 6,000 RPM. So I'm going to go ahead and press select program. That's right next to the list program button. That puts a little A next to it. So now that that's the active program, you can go to memory mode and press cycle start. So what this does is it cycles the spindle up slowly to 6,000 RPM. And the reason it does that is because while this machine sits, the lubrication in the bearings drips out of it. And we want to get that lubrication back in the bearings, so we got to cycle up slowly so we don't cause any damage. So this program takes about 20-25 minutes to run. So make sure you run that each and every day before you run this machine. If the machine has not been run at all within 4 days, a warning message will come up when you try to run a program. It'll say, hey, you need to run this program. So just make sure you do that first. So I've already run this today, so I'm just going to hit reset to get out of this program. And it beeps, so that means I'm good. And before we do anything, let's talk about how to navigate this and what these buttons do. So when you're navigating this screen here, I just want you to notice that this is the white screen here, the white pane, and the rest of these are blue. So the white one is the one that's active, and all the other ones are inactive, but you can still see them because they're useful to see. So to navigate this, you'll be using the 8 display keys here and these 6 mode keys. So we'll go through each one of those and kind of talk about what they mean. So let's start off with the mode keys, and we'll work our way down. So if you press edit, that brings you to the edit mode. So if I wanted to edit my program here, which is the spindle warm-up, I can scroll through with the cursor keys, or I can use the pulse generator to navigate that code. These 4 buttons here allow you to do things like insert code, alter the code, delete it, and you can press that undo button if you mess something up. I think you have about 10 undos before it runs out of memory. So you got your active program and your inactive program. You can scroll between those by pressing the edit key again. And you can see the white plane is the active one. So that's the edit mode. This is also where you're going to graph things from. So that'd be your graphics mode, which is that display key there. Next one down is the memory mode, and we already used that today. We ran our Spindle warm-up program from that. So things like single block, dry run, optional stop, delete block, those are all active in the memory mode, and those can be useful when running programs. So if I were to press cycle start right now, it's going to run that program. So I'm going to hit reset. The next one down is the MDI DNC mode. You'll be using this button a lot because this allows you to access the probing commands, conversational mode. So, and this is also where you can enter in G-code directly. So if I want to do a G01, for example, I don't know, some X and Y in a feed or whatever, I would just hit enter, and you see it's in the input line down here. If I hit enter, it's going to put it into the MDI program here. So you can do that with any string, any kind of block. So you use the alphanumeric keys to do that. And these are active in the MDI mode, so you can change tools and everything from this mode. So the next one down is the hand jog mode. And this is really useful because right now, our table's all the way far in the X direction, so it's going to be hard to load parts, load in parts, grab things from the machine, probe things out. So the hand jog mode is where you're going to actually use the axes and move them around. So to do that, from hand jog mode, you can select your jog rate from these 4 keys. So to the far right here, we have the quickest jog rate, which is 1/10 of an inch per click. So you can see that Z-axis moving pretty quickly there. And to the far left, we have 10,000ths per click. So you can see I'm moving this a lot, and you can barely see it moving. So each click is a 10,000th there. You can see that. So it's hard to see with the naked eye. So you can use the pulse generator to do that, or you can use these jog keys down here. So those are only active in the jog mode. So let's jog this X-axis to a usable position. So the tool's going -X right now, just keep that in mind. We're always looking at what the tool's doing. Now I can move my Z down, and you can see how quick that is. So I always recommend using a slower jog rate when you're moving the Z so you don't crash into anything. And then I can use the Y. All right. You can also press and hold each of these keys to move in the direction you want. So let's say I want to go positive Z, I can just hold and press the positive Z here. And it's moving at the specified jog rate, which is 10 inches per minute. You can see that right there. So if I want to increase that jog rate, I can use the overrides down here. I can increase that feed rate. Now when I do it, it's a little quicker. So, and the jog lock key is also useful. We'll cover that in a second. So if you want to actually cut some material now, you can do that from the hand jog mode, or you can go back to MDI, press program conversational to get into the manual mode. And you can also see there's all your other conversational modes. You can press enter, and now you can go ahead and jog this machine and run it just like a manual mill, just like a Bridgeport or anything like that. So to do that, you're going to use these override keys combined with the jog keys. So let's say I want to turn this spindle on at 3,000 RPM and I want to just face that part off. So we can do that really easily. Just type in 3,000, and you can see that shows up down here in the input line. And when I gotta have the doors closed to do this. And when I press clockwise, that spindle is now spinning clockwise at 3,000 RPM. You can see that there. If I want to bump that up incrementally by a percentage, I can do the overrides here again, and I can bump that up by 10 or -10%. So there's 10% more. And then you can always bring it back to 100. So there we go. So I'm just going to drop that jog rate down, use my jog keys. And I'm right where I want to be. So now I can use the jog lock key to jog this thing across, or I could just use the pulse generator. So here's, I can just jog this just like a manual machine, making some chips here. Move the Y. So you can see it's highlighted there. Now I'm back to the X. Now if I don't want to actually spin this handle, I can press and hold positive X here. Or I can press the jog lock button, press X positive, and it'll jog that way for me. So I don't have to sit here and click this thing around. So that can be very useful. So alright, that looks good. That's all I want to do. If I want to reset everything, stop the spindle, stop the axis movement, I can press reset, and that stops everything. So right now my tool's in the part, and that's kind of a dangerous place to be. So that brings us to our next key down here, and that's our 0 return mode. So from here, we can easily send that axis to the home position. We can send each axis at one time by giving it an X, Y, or Z, or we can send them all at one time by hitting the home. So in this case, I just want to send the Z home, and it's easy to kind of jog this in the wrong direction if you're not thinking. So I always just do Z, 0 return, and home, and it sends that axis home. So when it beeps, it's done. That's very useful. Now if I want to send the rest of the axes home, you can do that individually. So I can do X, 0, home, or I can just, since I'm in the 0 mode, I can just hit home, and everything rapids to the home position. So you can see we're at 0, 0, 0. So let me just point out that our MRZ is right about here, right in this area. So if you want to pay attention to the table or the tool, just note that any of your work offsets are going to be negative. So I'm going to close these back up. So our last key down here, we already used that. That's our list program. And this is where you're going to grab your programs off of USB, off the network, off the actual memory on the machine, wherever you want to get it from. And that'll be covered in a later video. Let's talk about these display keys a little bit here. So we already talked about program conversational. So if you're in MDI mode, program conversational, that brings you over to here. Press cancel to get out of that tab. You can use the cursor to scroll through these tabs here and do what you need to do. So if you want to use the probe, for example, that'd be in the setup tab. And then you can choose what you want to do. So the next one over is the position key, and that'll change this pane right here. So any mode you're in, doesn't really matter. If I'm in memory mode, I can hit that position key, and it's going to show me my current position. That's my MRZ, my machine position. There's distance to go, which doesn't apply because we're not going anywhere. There's our operator position and our work offsets. So that's G54. I'm not sure where that actually is, but you can see that's our current position from our work offset. And we'll talk about that in a later video. The next one over is the offset key. So it'll show your work offsets. It'll show your tool height offsets. So if I hit that, that brings me to here. And you can do that from different modes. So if I was in MDI, for example, I'd hit the offset, and you bring up a very similar menu. So right here's my tool offsets. You can see tool 1, my height geometry, my diameter geometry, coolant position, all that good stuff. If I hit it again, it brings me my work offsets. So you can see your X, Y, Z work offsets, and it's relative to your MRZ. So notice that these are all negative because they're from that tool position over and down. So if I want to change one of these, for example, let's say G54, I don't want it to be -17, I want it to be -16. So what I could do is that would be making this value less negative. So I'd actually just be adding 1. So I could enter 1 point, and you can see that shows up here in the input line. And if I want that to change that value, you notice that X is selected right now. So I'm going to hit X. I'm just going to hit enter. It's going to ask me if I want to do that. I'm going to say yes. So you can see that that changed. So all these menus are additive. So let's go back up to the coolant position here. So let's say coolant position number 5. It says 14 right now. I'm currently at 11. Maybe I want to make that 10, for example. I would type in -4, and then I'd hit enter, and that just changed that to 10 right there. So whatever you put in that input line, it stays there until you actually use it. So if I type in 5 and I change modes or whatever, it's going to stay there until I use it. So that's something to watch out for. So the next one over, current commands. This is where you're going to see things like cycle time, power on time, how many times you've run a program, so that's just kind of useful information. So the next one down here, alarm messages, that's going to show your active alarms. So right now we have no alarms, but if I hit the E-stop, now we have an alarm there. So it's going to show you which alarms are active. So I can release that E-stop and press reset to clear out those alarms. The next one over, parameters. And this is kind of where you change settings and stuff, so students really won't be messing with that button too much. The next one over is your graphing mode. So if you hit that, if you're in edit and you hit the graph, this is where you're actually going to be able to graph programs and simulate them before actually cutting any material. And the very last one down here is the help or calculations button. So if you're confused about something, you forgot how something works, you can hit that help button and that'll bring up this help menu. And if you hit enter here, it's got a lot of things like safety, introduction, subroutines, pretty much all the stuff we're going over. You can search for things. There's useful things like a drill table. There's a calculator. So that stuff's right there in that key. So as you can see, these 6 buttons here and these 4 or these 8 are the really ones you're going to be using a lot. The cursor is going to help you navigate this thing. So just kind of get used to how this works. And just remember that the white pane is the active one. All the other ones are inactive currently. So now that you kind of know how to get around this thing, I just want to show you one extra thing, and that's on the side here. So you'll notice I can turn on and off this light. That's because we have an accessory light button down here. So if I just swing that out, there's our light button. You might have some extra things down in here. Right here is where you're going to put a USB in, right in there. And if you want to run this, anytime you run anything on the machine, you're going to have the doors closed and they're actually going to be locked. So if you want to run something with the machine open, you can get this key here and you can put it in the setup mode. So you'll hear it beep. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So as you can see here, I'm just going to memory mode. When it's in the setup mode, you can see that that box shows you that the max spindle speed with the door open is 750 RPM and the max rapid is 25%. And the reason it gives you this option is if you're using something like an edge finder and you really want to get in there and see what's happening, help you set up the material, you can actually run the spindle with the doors open. So any other time you're not going to be allowed to do that. So I'm just going to turn that off, take the key out. All right, so now that we've learned some things about the machine, you've done whatever you need to do, you've ran your parts or whatever, you set up your stuff, you're ready to go ahead and shut the machine down. So there's a few things you want to do when you shut the machine down, and it's just good practice to do this, get it ready for the next person. So keep in mind that all this stuff on here is going to be saved, so anything you edit, anything you changed will be saved for the next time you turn on the machine. So we're ready to turn this thing off. We could just go ahead and hit the power off button, but there's a few things you want to do first. So first thing you want to do is bring that table back to the middle, and the reason you do that is it just takes the weight off the bearings. So we can do that hand jog mode. Just kind of bring that table back to the middle. All right, that looks good. You also want to take out any work that you left in the vise. Make sure it's ready for the next person to use. It's always a good idea to clean off your table, so you use the air gun. Just clean the chips out of the machine. Now, the next thing you want to do is take the current tool out of the spindle, so whatever the tool that is. So I'm just going to take that out. So, and if you're going to store this machine for any long period of time, like a week or so, you're going to want to oil up everything. So grab a little bit of oil, maybe squirt it on the vise, you know, just kind of get some oil on there so we don't get any rust issues. You can also oil up the spindle in here. That's also a good idea too. So now we've done all that, close up the doors. press the E-stop button and the power off, and you're good to go. So let's do that. E-stop, power off. And now I can go ahead and lock up the machine, do my lockout, tag outs, whatever I need to do, and it's ready for the next person to use. So that's about it for the TM-1p. It's a pretty easy machine to use. In the next few videos, we'll be covering how to specifically set up work offsets, our parts, our tools, and run an actual program.